Tom, what do you make to it?
Well, Kelvin says it's not necessarily a party political point, but the fact is, since Brexit, this government did get control of our borders insofar as legal migration. I mean, those figures are 91% increase in health and social care visas. You're right, for every one of those workers coming in, there's 3 dependents that's coming in off the back of those visas, although the government from the 11th of March is actually going to be clamping down, your point there, about workers bringing family dependents. But I think for me, the real point here is that the government's failing twice. It's failing to ensure a proper managed migration system where these numbers are coming down, point number 1. Point number 2, it's failing as an employer, because the vast majority of these work visas are in the health and social care sector. Why are we not paying enough to our domestic health and social care workers? Why are they going off and working in supermarkets rather than in our hospitals and in our care settings? Because the wages are lousy and they know they can exploit people coming from abroad with cheap wages.
And don't forget, I will never forget, actually, you remember tens of thousands of people in that sector. They were given the old heave-ho because they refused to have a vaccine, something that they didn't want. Well, where's all those people gone? Why have those people not been brought back into the fold? I suspect some of them would have told them where to put it, shall we say. But
it's almost impossible now to hire a UK worker into those industries, not least of all because under this system, and I don't particularly blame the care industry for it, they are allowed to pay 20% less to somebody from overseas to come and work for them rather than a UK employee. Now, I know within my own wider family, I know an example of somebody who applied for a job the other day and was told, absolutely, you've got no chance.
Yeah, Kelvin's all about the skills shortage occupation list, where basically you can hire from abroad, essentially at a discounted rate. We do seem to not value caring, though, in this country.
True.
So I cannot get my head around why we regard caring as essentially a minimum wage vocation. And I know there'll be people at home screaming at the telly going, minimum wage, Michelle, give me a break. Have we seen the carers allowance, for example? Chance would be a fine thing to get minimum wage. But why don't we value carers more?
Well, because we've allowed that to happen over recent decades. And the reason why we've allowed that to happen is because the Treasury, is like the economic orthodoxy of the Treasury, is to keep on adding to the labour supply because it boosts the overall size of the economic cake, GDP. Meanwhile, what we've seen in the last 15 years is stagnating wages, not just of the health and social care sector, actually across many sectors of the economy. Secular stagnation is what economists call it. But the point is, our living standards are being driven down by this obsession of the Treasury to keep on adding to labour supply just to grow the size of the cake, GDP, instead of actually wrestling with the real structural problems in our labour market, which is it's a race to the bottom in too many sectors, and health and social care is a classic example of that.
Well, Braverman, she's, of course, piped up today. So she took to Twitter saying 1.4 million people were granted visas here last year. Asylum approvals at record high. Work and student visa numbers, including many dependents, are appalling. This cannot go on. We don't have enough homes, GPs or schools to support this level. She goes on to say that the PM must adopt policies that I push for that would have prevented this national disaster. We need a cap on overall numbers. And then she ends by saying Britain will be unrecognisable if this carries on. It's not what the British people, including me, voted for. And that figure, by the way, I don't know if you heard in Polly Middlehurst's briefing there, the news bulletin, £15 million a day on things like the hotel costs. I mean, that is so insulting to British people, Kelvin, that go to work, that pay their taxes, that can't afford to put their own heating on, that are scrimping and saving in their own lives, that perhaps miss meals, etc., that can't get into doctors, to know that their tax is going on, in some cases, things like 4-star hotels it has been. It is a damn insult to them.
It is. I mean, one of the issues that she raised there was that we are challenged, as we all know, not enough schools outside London, strangely, which is actually shutting down as everybody takes flight. GPs, not enough homes being built, actually, to be truthful. There is enough work, but we fill them up, as you were correctly saying, Tom, actually with people from other nations around the world. So our issue is, that point that she makes is our country will become not recognisable. strangely, that's kind of heading towards kind of Enoch Powell area, right? But, however, if I noticed on my own Twitter that most people are piling in against Suella Braverman and saying, well, you were the blinking Home Secretary. How come you didn't do anything about it? And, of course, eventually, in truth, she was slung out because she wanted to do something about it. But that expression, unrecognisable, honestly, if you carried out a piece of research now, I'm just guessing here, on the poll of one, right, I suspect there would be quite a few people who would chime in with that thought process.
Of course.
But that's why, look, there has to be democratic consent for the managed migration system we have, which I do believe has got out of control in more recent years. Yes, there are one-off factors. No one's saying we should return Ukrainians fleeing a war in Europe. No one's saying that we shouldn't offer refuge to Hong Kong British nationals who have come here. They make up for a large amount of the figure. But where I absolutely disagree with Braverman's right-wing rhetoric on this, which does, as you say, have these overtones of Enoch Powell, and there are other Conservative commentators who are equally dancing and flirting with that kind of rhetoric. It's back to your point at the start, Kelvin. Regardless of who's in power, this is a country with an ageing population. We're going to need migration, point number one. Second point is, obviously, the government's got to sort out its own sector, like health and social care, where the vast majority of these worker visas are going, to make sure that we value the sector more. And one good way of doing that is by paying our social care workers. And that might mean, by the way, a new health and social care levy. I would get rid of national insurance because it's just another form of income tax. We need a debate in this country about how we actually fund long-term our health and social care system.
Do you think, though, that this is not really about money? Because we are very lucky. In my lifetime, we've gone down from number 3 in the world, down to about number 6 or 7 in the world. Even so, we are wealthy, right? We are creating a lot of money. Apportioning capital, which is a private equity kind of expression, God knows what it's doing in this debate, right, is the job of the government, right? So what is it that is going slightly wrong? Is it that people, actually everybody's got their hand out, nobody wants to work, they've all got mental health difficulties, which we're going to deal with later on in the show, I think, right? Or is it that it is impossible in a democracy to supply bad news? Have we got to the point where anybody who turns around and says, we are going to do this, for instance, we're going to push back, anybody who comes on a boat, crosses into us, we're literally going to turn it back. And if some people die, then we're prepared to take the hit on that. Would anybody ever say that?
No.
Right. And yet, in that case, we have to accept the consequences.
Yeah, but, and I would argue, actually, that one of the reasons that none of the politicians have got the chops to be able to do that, the media plays quite a crucial role in all of this. Because if you imagine, like, being a politician in this day and age, I do not envy these people. It's easy to criticise them. But, you know, they come up with an idea, they change it. The second that they then amend something, they're piled on for doing a U-turn, so they're getting absolutely battered by the press if they try and change their course. If any politician you wouldn't even be able to get the sentence out as a politician, we're going to consider turnbacks. You wouldn't get that sentence in its entirety out because you would be called every single name under the sun. The politicians would panic. Their 12-year-old advisors would panic and they would be changing course quicker than a quick thing from Quickland.
So what is the answer? Tom, you're to the left of me. Come on, you must have an answer.
It's a nuanced and complex debate, but there's absolutely one thing that Parliament should be doing, and that is, in my view, setting annual quotas for these worker visas, because that way MPs can't run away from the accountability. We now own our migration system. Our MPs need to be accountable for it.
Well, of course, but isn't that, this whole quotas and caps, isn't this just such basic kind of common sense? If you enable people to just ad infinitum recruit cheaper labour from overseas, well, why wouldn't they do that? We was talking the other day about fruit picking and whatnot. Many people got in touch and said, Michelle, I used to do fruit picking, but now a lot of these farms, they have these caravans on there now. So you have all of these foreign workers at a lower reduced wage living in caravans on site. So how on earth are you going to change all of that? Get in touch and let me know your thoughts.